In Chapter 4, we talk about Windows 7. This is a good place to start as far as drilling down to an individual operating system because I know you're all familiar with it because you use it everywhere you go up here. So no excuses on this one, right? So we're going to talk about Windows 7, some of the features, how we manage it, and then a little bit about security. Security can be a little bit different in each of the operating systems that we're going to be going over. So first let's talk about installing Windows 7. Some of you went ahead and jumped a little bit in the labs and installed Windows 7 on your VMs last week. If you did, that's great. That's just one step that you get to skip this week in doing your labs. Windows 7 was introduced in 2009. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but I guess it has. So mainstream support for Windows 7 ended on January 13th of 2015, but they are in what they call the extended support period. And that just means that they still release updates, but if you have a problem, you can't really call and get free support quite like you could anymore. But you still do get updates until the operating system ends its life. And we've kind of seen that happen in lately with Windows XP. You heard a lot about the day that Windows XP would no longer be supported. The hardware requirements for Windows 7 are pretty minimal. A 1 gigahertz processor, a gig of memory, 16 gigabytes of hard drive space. That's not very much, right? And a little bit of support for some of the fancier aero graphics that we'll talk about today that kind of made transparency and kind of had a glass-like look to the GUI in Windows. And also internet access if you wanted to keep it updated. There were several different editions of Windows 7, and each one is kind of meant to target a different market. So the first one, Windows 7 Home Premium, as you would guess, is for the home user that just needs to use the OS and doesn't need to do a lot of really advanced things with it. Windows 7 Professional, we'll talk about the difference between that in a minute. Windows 7 Ultimate, for more ultimate experience. There are other editions, OEM. OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. So that's for PCs that are being resold. So, for instance, someone like Dell manufactures hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of PCs. They don't have an individual key for every single PC that they go and type in. There's kind of a different process for that. They'll throw what they call an OEM license on it. So when you go to reinstall, you might have to enter a key that's located on the tower somewhere. But initially it comes with what's called an OEM license for that purpose. Then there's the Enterprise Edition, which is for really, really big companies that they want to make sure they have the utmost support for everything and they don't mind paying for it. They might use the Windows 7 Enterprise Edition. They might make payments in small chunks, get support when needed, as opposed to just buying a whole bunch of licenses up front and spending a whole bunch of money. There's a couple different kinds of Windows 7 installations. What you did was what we would call a clean installation. You weren't upgrading anything, you were just installing it onto a VM, and it wasn't like you were trying to overwrite anything because there wasn't a VM there previously, right? But an upgrade would install a newer OS over an existing OS. So let's say you had Windows Vista, that's what came before 7. You wanted to install an upgrade to it, which means all your stuff stays in the same place. All your programs are still installed, all your data is still in the same spot, you just get the look of the new OS. That preserves all of your stuff that you know of. Multi-boot leaves the operating system in place, but then it kind of divides up the hard drive in what we call partitions, and it says, okay, well this is where the old operating system, let's say Vista is going to be, and then in this other part we're going to put Windows 7. So technically you could still use both of them if you wanted to. When you boot up the computer, you get to choose which version do you want to go into. And then the clean installation, which is on the totally clean hard drive like we did in class. Here's an example of multi-boot, and you can pull up your PDF and look along with me. In this case, you can either navigate to Windows 7 or Windows Vista, and it will sit there and wait on you to kind of make that choice. Registering your copy of Windows 7 is completely optional, but it gives information to Microsoft about who you are and the address that you have on your computer. again, doesn't need to be done. But if you ever have trouble with your license later on, then you might be able to call up and get help a little more easily. Activation, however, activation is mandatory for all the retail editions. So this is trying to keep people who don't have a valid license for Windows 7 from being able to use the software. So you've got 30 days to activate. It doesn't do anything with your personal data. It just wants to know, hey, this is the computer that this license is tied to, and this is the number of times that that license has been installed. So you have to have a valid key code. If you don't have the internet, or let's say you have something like dial-up that's really, really slow, and maybe it's not very stable or not functioning that day, you can call in a 1-800 number and they'll give you a code to type in the computer that does essentially the same thing. But activation has to be done. You can select, if you just have a personal computer, and you're not particularly worried about using up your internet, as far as the capacity in which the ISP gives you every month, you can just say, go ahead and download updates for me, and that's probably the safest thing to do. But if you're in a corporation like we are here, we decide, the administrators of the domain decide when to push out updates. And as you can probably guess, it's probably not like 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, or at 9 a.m. on a Thursday, right? It's the nights, it's the weekends, it's when we can ensure that things have been tested and it's not going to mess anything out. So essentially they push out when those maintenance periods are, like weekends or the Christmas break, to make sure that everything gets updated. So one of the things that's really cool about Windows Update is you can have what's called a WSUS server, which is a server that goes and downloads all the Windows updates and then pushes them out individually to the clients. That means that each computer doesn't have to go to the internet and download those updates over and over and over again, because that would use up a whole lot of internet connection and it would slow everybody else down in the process. When you're ready to transfer over your settings and your data, there's different ways to be able to do this. They have something called Windows Easy Transfer that comes on the DVD that Windows 7 resides on. There's a special kind of USB cable that it gives you, and you can use what's called the Windows Easy Transfer Wizard to move all of your things to another computer, or maybe to a flash drive, a hard disk, kind of depending on how much stuff you have. But that can be a problem for an end user, maybe someone who's not really technically inclined. They don't really know where all their stuff is, right? Let's say they use QuickBooks. Well, QuickBooks installs your database in this folder and this file way, way, way down. You have to know where to go. If you were to do a clean installation on your computer and you didn't look for that first, then the information would be gone. So this is trying to be designed so that an end user can really easily move their stuff around and not miss anything. User accounts in Windows 7 are users, my documents, my music, my pictures, things like that. This tends to be where those things get moved, or where they stay. You can create a VM if you want to install it there, just like some of y'all did last week, and then boot to what we call an ISO file. So an ISO or an ISO is essentially a package of a CD that's got all the same things and does the same things as a CD, but it's for when you don't have a CD drive. So you have a virtual machine, you don't have a physical CD drive, right? Or if you did, I would have to give a CD to every single person in here and let you all use it one at a time, or make a whole bunch of CDs for everyone to use. But this is kind of bundling all that up in one spot so that you can just use one file. When you install Windows, you enter what's called the Windows PE, or the pre-installation environment. So this is a really, really light version of Windows that's got very limited driver support, but it has a GUI and it has a little bit of networking and things like that in it so that you can get your installation completed. Once you've installed, you want to verify that you can access the network, and this is what this looks like. The little it's a computer with a cable with an Ethernet jack on the end of it, if you look at it real close. You want to install your security software. Some does come with the operating systems, but some people like different things. Install your updates. And then if you have any kind of additions for the virtual machine, which we'll talk more about those later and why they made me really angry a couple weeks ago when I was trying to work out loud for this class. Installing Windows Updates is really easy. There's just a program called Windows Update. You open it up and you tell it when you want it to update. Let's talk about some of the features of Windows 7. So depending on which different version of Windows 7 you get, there are some features that are not available to you. The big jump becomes between Home, Premium, and Professional. So if you want to join a domain, like these computers are joined to a domain, when you log in, you can see logging into CSN Marsh. So that's the computer science domain where all the computer science computers are connected to. In a home environment, you don't have that, right? You just plug in your computer and you go. You don't have to connect to any kind of centralized server. So that becomes the big difference between Home, Premium, and Professional. As you could guess, Professional costs a little bit more money. So a lot of times businesses think they're saving money by getting something with Home Premium, but actually it just doesn't work in their environment. They have to upgrade it anyway. The Ultimate Edition, the only really difference is that there are more languages supported, and BitLocker, which is disk encryption. We'll talk about a little bit later on today, but that's really the only differences between the different kinds of software. So the Windows 7 desktop, you've got shortcuts, which is the icon that you see. You can double click. And then you've got the start menu. Thank goodness we got our start menu. Not every edition of Windows had it. We won't talk about that. The Windows 7 desktop, one of the things that made it look different was it had the transparent windows. There was a little bit of color, kind of had this glass-like kind of modern feel to it, and that feature is called Windows Aero. Some of the things that Windows Aero can do that I think are kind of cool. There was animation of windows. There's also things called Flip 3D. So even now on your computers in front of you, if you hold on the Windows key and tap Tab, did y'all have any result?
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of windy and
Kind of flips a little bit. It gives it like a 3D effect, so you can use the up and down arrows to go back and forth in between windows. That's kind of neat. There's arrow snaps. You can snap a window to the top of the screen and you can maximize it. Or you can click on the top and shake it and it'll minimize it. I always minimize things, but I don't mean to. But anyway, I like the snapping to the top and maximizing. There's also arrow peak, which is if you tap this little bitty thing right down here, it's going to make everything disappear. It's going to minimize every single window you have open. So a lot of times if you're like me and you have 15 different things open and something's making noise and you want to figure out what it is, you can kind of flip through and figure out that way. There's also jump lists and pinning. So we have the start button, but we can also pin icons to the bottom so that they stay there all the time. So that's another way of looking at your most recently used programs and determining what you want there. I'm not an icon on the desktop person. I think it looks messy. I want to see my pretty picture in the background. So I tend to pin things down here. So if I want to open up File Explorer, I can just click that instead of going through the menu and finding it. So it's just another way to get to the same kind of spot. There's also jump lists. So if you look over right here, Microsoft Office Publisher, it's going to show you all the recent things that were opened by Publisher. If you want to go back to it, you can just click on it and it will automatically open that file for you. That can be handy. Or you can do the same thing by right-clicking on the icon if it's been pinned. Windows 7 has a notification area, so it will tell you all the things that are open and all the different statuses that you might need to see. Sometimes it's interesting to see how many programs are open at one time, especially when you don't remember opening them. But it could show you, again, hidden icons would show you a list up here of everything else. The Action Center will talk about the network icon, volume control, your clock, and then that arrow peak feature. The Action Center has a message box. It's going to show you problems that your computer might have. That might be you haven't set up a backup and it recommends that you set one up just in case something goes wrong. It could be that your antivirus hasn't updated in a little bit and wants to keep you safe. There's what the Action Center looks like when it's all maximized so that you can see each one of these items and go through and check for updates, set a backup, or if not, you can just ignore it. Windows 7 has something called a library. So generally in the previous versions of Windows, we put music in the music folder, we put pictures in the picture folder, and anywhere else you had that, you had to kind of go browse for yourself. But now you can have a library where you can have the contents of multiple folders. So if you want to keep documents in more than one place, you have a document library, and you can choose which folders go inside of it. So that might be nice for multiple users if they want to be able to share between them. But you're not bound by your documents folder anymore. It can actually be from any location. Windows 7 supports a variety of FAT file systems. The FAT file systems are normally used with flash drives, jump drives, whatever you like to call them. But Windows uses the NTFS file system. So this is basically the system that Windows is installed on top of so that we can have file and folder security. We'll talk more about that in next chapters. The encryption of files so that if it was intercepted by someone, they couldn't be able to see it. It would just look like scrambled up stuff. And compressing files if we need them to be a little bit smaller. For optical discs, they use CDFS, the CD-ROM file system, that reads CD-ROMs and then reads and writes to readable and rewritable, RW rewritable. There's also universal disk format that DVDs use for the same purpose. So in Windows Vista, the thing that everybody fussed about was the user account control, where it would constantly pop up and be like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? Over and over. Well, they took with Windows 7, they tried to improve that. So they made it less annoying. Essentially, they made it to where you could just pop up what they call the consent prompt instead of constantly having to type in your password. So they did change that a little bit. They added BitLocker and BitLocker to Go. So you can encrypt either the internal hard drive in the computer or a flash drive that you would plug in with your information. App Locker, so that is a feature where if you're on a domain, the administrator of the domain can lock someone out of specific apps. So maybe you don't want them playing solitaire at work, so you can lock them out of solitaire. And then Windows Defender, which is an anti-spyware tool. Another feature of Windows 7 is program compatibility. So it does happen a lot that there are older programs that need to be used on newer computers. So let's say we're a manufacturing firm and someone built the software for Windows XP like 15 years ago, but it was really, really expensive. But we really need that piece of software to run because it runs this machine. And this machine makes money. So we need this software to run to produce this machine. Well, they use Windows XP mode, which I think has been discontinued at this point, but you can make Windows 7, or make the program think it's running in Windows XP, even if it's running in Windows 7, which is kind of a cool feature and ends up being pretty handy in situations for older, or what we call legacy applications, that maybe they don't work so well in Windows 7, or maybe not at all. On the Windows 7 DVD, there's going to be some recovery tools. You can restart your computer and then boot to the DVD by changing some settings. And it will give you some different kinds of startup repair, system restore, things like that that we will talk about in a moment. So things you can manage, things you can change in Windows 7, the disk management. If you go to disk management, which one of the great things about Windows 7 is you could just hit the start menu and start typing and it will show you the tool that you need. It's kind of good about searching for everything. You can do disk management and see all the disks that are installed in your computer and what the letters, the drive letters are attached to those. New drives are going to come with FAT32. You can also format a drive so that it wipes all the data off of it. Of course, just be careful when you're doing that you're doing it to the right drive. You can even convert a disk to a different file system. The non-destructive way, which means it doesn't ruin everything on the disk, you can actually use command prompt to type something in. This to me looks super risky though. Like, I don't think I'd ever try that. I would type something in wrong, and I would end up deleting things I did not mean to delete. You can customize your display settings. How many of y'all came in here for the first time and worked with dual monitors? No? A couple people? Once you use dual monitors, it's really difficult to go back to just a single one. But one of the nice things about Windows 7 is it lets you like flip your displays around, make one a main display that's got the taskbar and one a secondary display. There's all kinds of resolution and display things that you can do in Windows 7 that are very, very helpful. For instance, you can identify what's number of each screen. Is this monitor 1, monitor 2? And it'll help you kind of figure out where you want everything to be. You can add a printer. That's really easy. Just go to devices and printers and say add a printer, or you can connect to one that's already on the network if you know what it's called or what its address is. You can install and remove applications. In this instance, you can actually go in and if you know a Windows update messed something up, you can go find that Windows update and take it away. That's pretty nice. Sometimes Windows updates, they're meant to fix things, but they do break other things in the process. And if that happens, that's how you can get rid of that. This is programs and features. So this is a list of all the programs installed on your computer. If you want to get rid of something, you can just click on it and say uninstall. If a program is broken, sometimes you can click on it and say repair, and it will try to reinstall that without messing up any of the files in it. Now, be careful here because sometimes we're tempted to go, oh, I don't know what that is, I'll just delete it. But a lot of times another program may use it in some way, and taking something off of that may break it. So just be aware of what and even a quick Google search will help you out there with what you're getting rid of. You can turn Windows features on and off if you decide you don't need to use something. You can go into Windows and take it away. But you can always go back and re-enable it. There's a file hierarchy with Windows 7, just like all the previous versions of Windows. You can see here Control Disk C, different files inside that. If you click over here on the left pane, you see all the contents that are inside that file. So there's a hierarchical structure to the files. There's also personal folders. You can see under the users folder, it's going to make a folder for the first name of everybody that you put on that computer. Or not even the first name, it'll just be the username. You can save and open your files within apps or applications. Kind of depends on the version of Windows that you're using as to what it's called. Or you can use Windows Explorer to do the same thing. So for example, you can double-click something and open it. You can preview something or create a new folder all from this window. You can also add locations, those libraries that we were talking about, add new folders to those libraries so everything is just shown on one screen, and change your default save locations. Okay, let's talk a little bit about security. So we have what we call the user accounts applet. So this is where you would go to set up new accounts, change passwords, change people's permissions if you're an administrator and you can do so, change the picture that goes along with your account. You would do that here. You can go to manage accounts and see different ones, create new accounts. What's the purpose of having more than one account on a computer? Why doesn't everybody just log in with their one account?
Password?
Huh?
Have different passwords?
Yeah. Why do we need that though?
I guess if one gets compromised or something.
Okay.
Keep them from seeing your
keep,
Personal
right,
information.
you're trying to keep your personal information private, right? So we do that in lots of different ways. Here you log into an account that is shared with the server over all of the IT studies classrooms. This is talking about on one individual computer like at home. Like if you have 2 kids and each one of them has their own account, right? So we're not talking at the domain level yet here. We're just talking about on an individual PC. So I do want to make that clear. So the user account control, we said Windows Vista was really annoying and they popped up things all the time. This triggers fewer things. It has what's called a consent prompt, where instead of making you type in passwords, it just says, is it okay if something does this? And sometimes something is making an administrative change to your computer and you don't even realize it. So sometimes it's nice to know, hey, no, I don't want that thing to do something right now because I'm in the middle of something. Or the credentials prompt, and then it's going to ask for an administrative username and password. Because we don't want everybody to be an administrator, right? We don't want everybody to have the ability to change and install things. We don't know what they're going to do. They may not know what they're doing. And you'll end up like that computer was a couple weeks ago where it was eaten up with viruses, like all of a sudden, and we didn't know why. Files and folders have permissions within them, so each file or folder has what's called an access control list. As you might guess, it's a list of the people who can access it, right? So each one of those has an access control entry, which is, here's the account in the computer, do they have access to it or not? What is their level of permission for that file or folder? You can change those too. You can go in and take people's permissions away or add permissions if it is your file. There's different folder and file permissions. You can give someone full control to do whatever they want. They can modify it, they can read and execute it, they can just read it, or they can write as in change it. Or they can just see what's inside the folder but not be able to do anything with it. For files, it's about the same, except you can't list folder contents because it's not a folder, it's a file. So NTFS, this new technology file system that Windows uses, has something called inheritance. So just like you inherit traits from your parents, folders inherit traits from the folder above it, the folder it came from, so to speak. So something that is inherited cannot be altered, but you can keep folders that are created from getting those traits. BitLocker is used to encrypt a hard drive. So this is with the Ultimate or the Enterprise edition of Windows. In Windows 7, it just encrypted the drive that Windows was stored on. Or sorry, in Windows Vista. In Windows 7, it encrypts just about anything. There's BitLocker to go, which will do like your removable media, your flash drives and things like that. But it does encrypt the entire drive. So what does that mean for us to encrypt the entire drive? That means if, let's use the flash drive example. So we have some sort of important business information that's supposed to remain confidential. We have the recipe for Coca-Cola on a flash drive, which is stupid. We would never do that, right? But let's say we do. If we encrypt that information, that means if somebody gets that flash drive and plugs it into their computer, they can't tell what the ingredients to Coca-Cola is, right? They see a bunch of jumbled up mess, they see capital letters, lowercase numbers, letters, numbers, but they don't actually see the contents of the file. You would have to decrypt that with a key from the original computer, right, to be able to get that information. So that's what BitLocker does. So the security is through the fact that no one would be able to figure out what the contents were without the key. If you want to encrypt something in Windows, all you have to do is go select the drive and then say, turn on BitLocker, if you have a version of Windows that will let you do that. You can manage that in Control Panel, turn it on or off for different drives. Encryption is a great tool, but it's kind of one of those things that it takes a lot of processor power to do it, and you really only do it if you've got something that you need to keep confidential. Windows Defender is a free anti-spyware program that comes with Windows. When you install any other kind of antivirus or anti-spyware software, it automatically turns off. It assumes that you've already got something in place, so I'm just going to turn off so the programs don't compete with each other. We talked about in Chapter 2 how having more than one antivirus is not a good idea. The same thing is known by Windows Defender. So it kind of just scoots away, turns off. Windows Security Essential is real-time protection against malware. So this is like an antivirus that's built into Windows 7. It schedules scans of the whole disk and makes sure you don't have any kind of malicious software on your computer. Windows Firewall. A firewall watches the information that comes in and out of your network or your computer, depending on where it is, to make sure that none of it's malicious. So Windows Firewall has something already in place for that, it's a firewall for that individual computer. Okay.